we can perhaps start this second panel of this. And first of all, I wanted to welcome you into this first edition of the European Green Infrastructure Day, which we are very excited about. It has started very well this morning with already the first round of very nice presentations from the European Environment Agency. They published a very nice report, a newly published report on climate adaptation and nature-based solution. And then with a nice exchange around the issue of biodiversity. So how green infrastructure can increase and support and halt the loss of biodiversity, which is a big problem in Europe and worldwide. Now, I'm very excited to start this new panel. The title of this session is about is turning building into carbon sink to drive the energy and climate transition. I'm extremely happy to have you as part of all of you as part of this panel, because it's a topic again of very relevant in the political agenda in Europe and at global level. I will be moderating this session as head of the European chapter of the World Green Infrastructure Network, which is a multi-stakeholder platform advocating for the systematic integration of green infrastructure in urban areas. And I will start with briefly introducing the speaker of this morning. So we have Aurelie Beauvais, Deputy CEO and Policy Director at Solar Power Europe. Hi, Aurelie, thank you very much and for accepting the invitation. We have Stefan Moser. Stefan is head of unit for energy efficiency, buildings and products in DG Energy, Directorate General Energy of the European Commission. And good morning, Stefan. Morning. And we have Jure Sumi. Jure is taking part to this meeting as president of the Slovenian Green Infrastructure Association. We will be joined, as I said at the beginning, a little bit later by Jutta Paulus, a member of European Parliament from the Greens. So I would like to kickstart the discussion, if it is okay with you, with a series of questions, and I would like all of you to provide some observations, recommendations. Let's try to keep this as informal and interactive as possible. And I also would like to address the many participants actually that we have online at the moment, that it is possible to interact with the panel using the Q&A facility, which is at the bottom of the screen. So please write down your questions, and we will try to, as much as possible, to address them within I will try to direct the questions to the speakers. So I would like to start with the first round of comment on a question which relates to and we need to start from the renovation wave strategy. I think this was back in October last year. The European Commission set a little bit the scene for what for the future of the building, so the vision for the building stock within the European Union. And I think there were two main points that I would like to highlight. Is main two objectives, let's say, of this strategy. The first one, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the building stock by 60%, and secondly, reduce energy consumption by 14%. I think, and this by 2030. Now, green infrastructure in this paper, in this strategy, are mentioned among some of the drivers that should indeed define the building renovation programs. And also in the renovation wave strategy paper, there is a very nice, really nice, because the wording is very compelling, where in the conclusions of this document, where indeed the Commission kind of unveil and outline its vision for 2030, where indeed the vision is to see buildings transforming, so the building stock transforming from carbon source into carbon sink. And I think this has been also the very nice inspiration for the title of this panel. Now, we all know that to achieve these objectives of emission reductions, of reduction of energy, we need to look at different solutions. And this is also the reason why this panel has been, we have a variety of voice, of point of view in this panel. So my question, and I would like to start perhaps with this, with Jure, so that Jure, maybe you can also frame a little bit the issue from a technical point of view. So the question is, which role, I mean, do you think green infrastructure can play within this broader goal of decarbonizing the EU building stock by 2030, and ultimately, basically reducing emission by 2030 and decarbonizing by 2050? Jure, the floor is yours. If you can, you can stay within 3-5 minutes so that we can pass then on to the other. Thank you.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. So I would say green infrastructure can really highly contribute to reducing the CO2, as it has been pointed out in the renovation wave. And in the past was sort of, whether green infrastructure is either carbon sink or, it's actually contributing to have more carbon in the air. But, all the results which we have from the researches around the world and in Europe, we know that actually green roofs have multiple levels and benefits for the decarbonization. Firstly, directly, green roofs and walls and other green infrastructure are actually acting as a building, on the building as a carbon sink or around the building. The different researchers show different numbers, but we know that a basic green roof, for example, with small plants, simple plants, grasses, could absorb between 3 and 5 kilo of CO2 per square meter per year, which is something, considering how many green roofs, how many roofs there are that could be green. But as soon as you involve a bit higher plants, maybe some shrubs, in some cases also some trees, this amount can go up in several times. And also when you look into some EPDs, so environmental product declarations, because there are some people who say, but you need to fertilize, you need to grow the plants, you need to add water. On the long term, the positive effect is always positive. For a simple roof, it's at least 50 to 60, even 100 kilos per square meter in a lifetime, which is a span of 20, 30 years, considering all the other negative effects, which is, building the green roof, putting the water. So this was the direct sink, but we have a lot of others which are sort of indirect. So first of all, it's a shadowing effect on the roof and its insulation. So plenty of less air conditioning needed for the spaces beneath the roof, the green roof directly. And then further on, even more effective, I think it's a stormwater management. So the roofs are acting as a retention or detention of the rainwater. And this reduces the flow of rainwater going into the sewage systems or stormwater systems, which is basically also preventing this water to be cleaned. So all the cleaning facilities, the sewage or the stormwater cleaning facility, they don't need to clean the water which stays on the roof. So you can imagine if you don't clean it, you don't need energy. So a massive saving on the energy, and energy you need to produce. To produce it, you do the CO2. So there are direct and indirect benefits of the green roofs. And next to the carbon sink, just to finalize this is, green roofs and green walls and green infrastructure, they all also provide more biodiversity. There are potential for new amenity space, new space for people to socialize, which is becoming, we all see, even more important during the crisis which we had.
Thank you, Jure. And it's interesting the reference that you make to the reduction of the potential reduction of energy consumption of urban wastewater treatment plant, because indeed this is also one of the examples that are indicated, that are listed into the energy efficiency first principle guidelines that the European Commission is working on. Perhaps Stefan will give us more information about that as well. And indeed, I would like to pass the floor to Stefan. Stefan, can you give your point of view, so the point of views of the European Commission on this initial question, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luigi, and good morning to all of you. And I'm very happy to be here. Indeed, what Jure said, I fully agree with. There's a very important role for exploiting all aspects of decarbonizing buildings, and of course also saving energy. There are multiple benefits from greening walls and roofs. Not only the water effects, but also the cooling effects, the natural cooling effects, biodiversity effects, and all that. Of course, decarbonizing buildings goes far beyond that. I think it includes the integration of renewable energy production in the building, on the building, but also close to the building, locally produced, but even further away, and store also in the buildings variable renewable energy, for instance, in hot water. So there's a very important role for buildings in the broader energy system to decarbonize, to use the space of the building and the functionalities of the building, notably in terms of hot water needs to store energy when it's cheap, basically, and available, both direct solar heating facilities, but also electricity. And then, of course, also the flexibility provided by buildings storing, but also then adjusting energy consumption in the buildings to what actually is the current situation on the renewable energy market. It's of course the broader energy market, electricity, but when prices are low, basically that buildings would more actively consume, that there would be smart systems, and the inhabitants would actually directly link. We have and react. Of course, there's also the very important role of buildings in terms of when we talk about green infrastructure, to link it with transport. That's a major issue for us, to green the transport system, use buildings as a place to recharge, to have sufficient facilities in the buildings, not only for cars, but also other vehicles like bikes and scooters, to make sure that basically this is also part of green infrastructure. It goes beyond, of course, the green color, but it's basically the renewable energy infrastructure for which buildings need to play a much more active role in the future. So that is, and then of course, then also we look at the physical structure of the building, at the content, the construction materials of the building, where the question comes up and needs to be investigated: how do we best use buildings from the physical elements used to construct building to decarbonize by having nature-based solutions. Of course, there's the issue of wood, but other materials, to really have an optimization. There needs to be an optimization across a variety of factors, including, of course, safety aspects, stability, material characteristics, which are very, very important to be examined from an engineering point of view and a material safety point of view. But there will be a much bigger role for decarbonizing the buildings also from the physical components, and really look at the entire life cycle. So basically it's about in its physical structure to decarbonize and even use it as a carbon sink, to create carbon sinks for new buildings, basically that they would use materials which actually store carbon, instead of generating a lot of carbon emissions during the production phase. But then, of course, the operation of the building, as I mentioned, integration in the renewable energy system. And there we should use, indeed, nature-based solutions as much as possible. Cooling is one of the major challenges in buildings, decarbonizing heating and cooling. And of course, green infrastructure, as Jure said, plays a major role in terms of naturally providing cooling effects on the facade, on the roof. And that is in itself already a huge source of reducing energy demand in hotter climates. Of course, there may also be a certain aspect of heating, of insulating. Plants can also, green facades and roofs can also insulate to a large degree buildings. So heating demands would also, energy demands for heating would also go down. But I think this needs to be really exploited. The renovation wave is a holistic agenda where we said we should go beyond individual aspects when triggering a renovation, but rather have a strategic approach and really look across the whole spectrum of what needs to be improved in buildings for the citizens. And that is, of course, the energy, climate, and environment agenda. It is the transport agenda, that people have easy access to recharging and can use, for instance, electric cars as one of the major solutions in the future. But then also health. Green infrastructure plays a major role for health, as Jure said, for recreational activities, well-being, but also cleaning air and water. And of course, then also the air quality would probably mostly be improved in buildings also from that. And then of course, the renovation wave even goes beyond that in terms of accessibility and broader safety issues. There are very good indications that green infrastructure only contributes to the safety of the building, reducing fire safety, for instance, because you have a kind of more humid shell of the building and can then maybe reduce also possibly dangerous components and reduce the fire hazards, for instance. So there are lots of elements. What we do in the Commission is, of course, to provide for the regulatory framework, to point to the issues, also provide, in cooperation with the member states and the international finance institutions, funding and technical assistance. But the agenda is not and cannot be set from Brussels in the sense of you have to do exactly this. This will be the task of the local actors, of the local municipal governments, regional governments, but also the owners and the financial institutions, and in particular the citizens, who have to drive this forward by identifying their demands and their wishes and bring that in then basically in the strategic reflections on the in the local communities and districts. So thank you very much for that opportunity first to introduce, and then I will very much look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Stefan. Very nice holistic vision. Aurelie, would you like to provide your first inputs on this first question? So which role do you see from obviously from your perspective, and I think your perspective is a very interesting one, because obviously the solar industry and solar systems are a symbol or an icon of climate action. So in view of the ambition of reducing emission up to 2030 and 2050. So what's your view on this?
Yes, thank you very much, Luigi. I think indeed I cannot really add anything to what Jure and Stefan said. It was already very encompassing and highlighting the various benefits we can see. And I'm very happy also that Stefan mentioned the benefits which also go way beyond decarbonization and energy efficiency, notably health, making our cities more livable, because as we are, maybe most of us, at least here on this panel, urban people, I think it's also extremely important to make our cities a more livable place. But it's true that on top of that, and on top of the fact that it's pretty and it makes your air cleaner, we also see indeed very nice synergies with green roof and with solar panels. It's true, and we have already met several times, Mr. Moser, to discuss that solar rooftops from our perspective are in any case a solution which is critical to decarbonize the building stocks. It's very cost efficient, it's very modular, it's very versatile. You can put it on a facade, on a roof, so only that is a very good benefit, because buildings in itself are not used enough for their renewable energy generation potential. And it was already mentioned by my two previous co-panelists that basically we also need to do much more to integrate the notion of renewable energy generation into the building in general. But it's true that on top of that, there is a bit of a bridge between the actual green roof, which is really plants on a roof, and the PV panel installation. And notably, I think there are three synergies which are, from our perspective, quite relevant. The first one is really the dual use of space, because especially in urban areas and more across countries, space is becoming a very scarce resource, unfortunately. Yet 90% of our rooftop spaces remain unused for clean energy generation. So that's good news. We still have a lot of space, and this potential is it could generate up to 680 terawatt hour of electricity. So that's today on average 25% of the current electricity demand, and that's coming from the GRC. But this dual use can also then be optimized on a roof with a PV panel and growing plants below that, based on the model that Jure explained before. This will also have spillover effects, what we have observed, that remains very innovative. But for example, the presence of the plants on the roof will, as we said, cool the building. And in fact, it will make sure that the roof temperature is also optimal for increasing the efficiency of PV panels. So we have observed in some of the case studies we've worked on that, yes, the green roof will basically keep the roof temperature on average between 23 and 25 degrees, which is the temperature in which PV panels are the most efficient. Obviously, this higher increase of efficiency will be compensated by the fact that you cannot put as much PV panels on a green roof than on a normal roof, because you need some light to go through in order to feed the plants. So that's not a net gain, but that's a gain which tells you that you can generate as much as you would if you were covering a bigger surface. And on top of that, you have eventually plants growing on your roof. There are also interesting, like surprising sometimes spillover effects, like the fact that the presence of the PV panel will in fact enhance water repartition on the roof, with sometimes, as you know, PV panels tend to be bent, some areas which are going to be with more water, some areas with less water. And surprisingly, it will also support the diversity of plants that you will have on the same roof, with all the spillover effects that we know, once again, on having a variety of insects, which will go for different kind of plants. And so the whole diversity, in fact, of the fauna on the roof is enhanced via this very nice symbiosis between the bio installation and the solar roof. That's why we call it a bio solar installations, by the way. It's kind of the small scale replication of something that we already see very much in the large scale, which is called agri-solar, agri-PV. And so we already see that large scale solar installations in many areas are supporting biodiversity where they are installed, and notably the growth of insects, as well as the productivity of crops when it's combined with notably agricultural production facilities. So looking at the lessons learned from agri-solar, from the larger scale, which is maybe a bit more rolled out than the rooftop model, we also start to have, I would say, more experience on how to really enhance the efficiency of this combination. And notably, I think working with local biodiversity experts is really something which we realized increases overall the efficiency of the rooftop, as well as optimizing, as I said, the repartition of the PV panel, which is very important to get the most out of it. But all in all, as you said, green infrastructure, I think obviously it's very interesting for all the reasons mentioned before, but on top of this, surprising synergies with solar indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Aurelie. This is very, very interesting what you said. Maybe on this, because I think you touched upon a very important point. I mean, this synergy between solar and green infrastructure. I would like to go back to Jure Maybe Jure, on this specific point, if you can give from your perspective, so from in terms of technicalities, feasibility, existing solutions, if you can elaborate more and provide more information on these aspects. Aurelie mentioned some average temperature for the roof, 23, 25 degrees, that would improve the efficiency of the systems. So can you add more on this from this point of view?
Yeah, gladly. So first of all, okay, Aurelie, thank you, because you are really pointing out the things which we need to do together. So first of all, we need to stop thinking about putting on the roof either green or solar. That's clear. I mean, I'm also a spokesman for the industry at World Green Infrastructure Network, and we constantly have that. We lost the projects because the solars are there. So we just need to put this aside and say, okay, we want to maximize the economic and social benefit as well as improving the environment. So clearly, green roofs are bringing biodiversity, natural habitat. They are revitalizing the natural water cycle, which is basically key for having this heat island effect reduction. So lowering the temperatures on the roof in order to for solar panels, photovoltaic, to work better. So we have plenty of tools, scientific tools, which were even developed by some European funding, where we could actually, for every city in Europe, in the world, we could actually define what will be the heat island effect reduction, and from out of that we can see what will be the performance benefit of the green roofs. So if you look at the urban heat island effect, and if you take an average city, even in Central Europe, during the time of real summer, hot summer, the temperature between the green roof and the normal, gray roof will be up to 40 degrees Celsius. And there are a couple of providers of solar panels who say that, increase of temperature on the roof above this 23, 25 degrees will decrease the performance for 0.5%. So you can then say, okay, if it increases for 40 degrees, this means the efficiency down for 20%. And there are plenty of studies who are showing that in average, there is between 12 to 16% improvement in efficiency of the solar panels if you put a green roof around the solar panels. And all that was already pretty much proven many times. So we just need to, we need to make sure that we have the policies, and also I think, the legislation policies, and also maybe funding options that will support embedding, both solution as one concept. So this, I think it will be definitely crucial. And further on, with next to the solar panels, then you have also air conditioning. We know for air conditioning units which are on the designed on the roofs, they will work much more efficient if you have a cool roof versus the hot roof. And there the increase is even bigger. The decrease in temperature on the roof for 1%, will increase the performance or efficiency of the air conditioning for 2%. So the efficiency increase is even much better. So I would say combination of solars and air conditioning units and the green roofs. This can be a major boost for everyone. So I think we need to push for that, really, and I think we need to work more hands in hand, with you, Aurelie, with your association and World Green Infrastructure Network.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jure. I think you didn't touch upon the issue of the other phase or the other advantage of the increase in biodiversity that the solar panel can generate because of the habitat mosaic, if you want. I mean, Aurelie was talking about some points on some different conditions that can create solar panel on the roof, which I think is also particularly relevant. So there is this let's say win-win.
Yeah.
but I see also that Mrs. Paulus has joined the call. Maybe can you please put? Oh, okay, yes, wonderful. We can see you. Thank you very much for joining. And I mean, I would go immediately back to you with because we just finished kind of the first round of comments or observation on the first question, which was about which is the role that you envisage for green infrastructure within the ambitious objective set by the renovation wave back in October to indeed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from building by 60% and then reduce their energy consumption by 14% by 2030. So if you can, Mrs. Paulus, if you can give us your first observation on how do you indeed you and of course also do you see also the European Parliament to consider the impact of this the important relevance of green infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, and sorry for the delay. There was a very short notice for a public hearing on methane emissions in the agricultural, environmental and energy sector. And as I'm shadow for the initiative report in 2 of the committees, I had to attend, and it was really very important information. So please excuse the delay. When it comes to green infrastructure, actually, I try to enshrine this respect in the renovation wave INI that the Parliament made last year, because I was shadow in the Environmental Committee, and the Environmental Committee gave an opinion to the leading committee, which is of course Industry, Research, Energy Committee, where we really had a phrase on the green infrastructure, but unfortunately it was very much watered down, and so now there is no obligation or anything left for buildings or quarters that are funded with EU means to include green infrastructure. What we are achieving is that regional governments are looking at this issue more closely. First of all, as you said, because this green infrastructure can actually save us energy, which we don't need to cool the buildings because the plants are doing it for us, because we can reap more solar energy if the roof beneath it is better cooled. And also more and more citizens and also businesses, also governments are looking at the biodiversity effects. And the more we learn about especially like wild pollinators, which are very much endangered, much more than the honeybee, because I mean, the honeybee is a domesticized animal, so to speak, and it has people looking after it, but wild pollinators don't. And a lot of our wild pollinators have very small ranges where they feed, where they live, where they reproduce. And more cities and communities try to take care more of the biodiversity issues. And so they say, what can we do on our local level in order to improve biodiversity? Because I mean, it's clear we have more than 50% of our European land is cultivated in one or the other way and is treated with fertilizers, insecticides, pesticides, whatever. Of course, this has an effect on the biodiversity. And the more and more citizens are being really afraid of what biodiversity loss might mean, of course, they are putting pressure on their politicians and also on their local politicians to take action. So what I really would like to see in the renovation wave and the Bauhaus strategy, once it comes out, once it really comes out as a program, is that we have the obligation to look how could green infrastructure be implemented not only at building level, but also at quarter level. I found it very interesting. I read it the other day that there was a study on how people are content with their life, how they suffered under the pandemic, for example. And not surprisingly, the researchers found out that people tended to cope very much better the more green they had in their environment. And this is, of course, also true for the urban population. So people living close to a park or even close to a rather small green space have already a much better psychic condition, so to speak. They can cope better with whatever this pandemic has put as strains upon us. And that's something I think that politicians at the EU level, but also at the local level, should take into account, because it's in my opinion, it's the task of politicians to make the lives of citizens better. And employing green infrastructure in our buildings, in our communities, is a rather cost-effective way to do so. And it's beneficial in so many different proportions. So I really look forward to researchers that are invited to the European Commission, being part of the Bauhaus initiative, that they also put forward these arguments in order to bring the EU to actually put really financial support to green infrastructure solutions. That's okay for a start?
It is wonderful. It is a wonderful start. Thank you very much. And we will ask today. We have a nice panel 6 of this day with Xavier Troussard and a member of the cabinet of Commissioner Simpson to discuss about these aspects related to the new European Bauhaus. And relation is actually with another speaker that will look at the health benefits of the green infrastructure. So it is something that is under our radar, and we fully agree with your views. I also wanted to acknowledge your support to try to enshrine and integrate green infrastructure within the renovation wave. We wanted to thank you as World Green Infrastructure Network for your continuous support. And I think on the point of regulatory measure, regulatory framework, I think we can open the second round of questions and discussion. And indeed, I wanted because there is the need. There is an issue of urgency. I mean, we have to act now because this is really the decade of climate action. I mean, we cannot really waste any more time. So there are some important policy and regulatory development in the pipeline. The Fit for 55 is due to be presented soon, mid-July. There is the energy performance of building directive, which I think is the big piece of legislation that will hopefully contribute to transform the building stock in the European Union. So I wanted to ask, starting from you, Stefan, considering your key role with this important piece of legislation, so the PBD. I mean, how do you see the integration of green infrastructure within this, or is this under your radar, under the radar of the Commission? Is part of the analysis of the necessary assessment that you are carrying out? Can you please let us know? Maybe if you, Stefan, can also perhaps introduce a little bit the work on the energy performance of building directive, because I think we have participants from different parts of the, given the global nature of World Green Infrastructure Network, we have also people participating from other regions of the world. And as always, the European Commission has also a role of inspiring other market, other region. So I think if we are good here in Europe and we manage to do something well with the integration of green infrastructure, we can inspire certainly also other governments and beyond the border of the European Union. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luigi. The Energy Performance in Buildings Directive is, of course, only one of the elements governing buildings. Yeah? So this is, one needs to see the whole picture here. We have the Energy Efficiency Directive and also the Energy Efficiency First guidelines and the Renewable Energy Directive, but also the ETS emissions trading scheme, possibly extension to buildings in July. So this needs to be seen together with the EPBD, the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, and of course also the recovery funds, all the efforts to promote good practices and make sure that the funding is channeled towards where the biggest benefits are created. Then of course we have also the cohesion policy funds. So there's not the one and only regulatory instrument which would push forward green infrastructure. But one needs to see how they interplay, how they work together. There's not one single buildings code at European level. This could have been done, but it was chosen not to be done because there are also good arguments to maintain the focus of certain pieces of legislation on certain aspects like renewable energy, energy efficiency, and then the of buildings and more broadly. Then also there are guidelines. There will be guidelines on green public procurement. That's a major issue. I see that also in the questions. And as mentioned, a very fundamental arm will be the financial side with the recovery funds, the long-term renovation strategies as a basis in substance, and the energy and climate plans to make sure that there's sufficient absorption capacity. In the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, which will come as a revision, as a proposal from the Commission to revise it by the end of the year, we look more specifically into minimum energy performance standards. And the question is now how to shape them, what elements would be included, how best to find the balance between EU level indications, requirements, and actually flexibility at the national level. There will always be national, regional, and local circumstances, specific circumstances, which have to be taken into account. And that relates very much to the building sector also in the future. There cannot be a centralization, a kind of general harmonization of everything. But what we want to do is to put the major challenges, but also policy goals on the table of all the actors that they have to think about them, about the energy performance, about the integration of renewable energy, and especially decarbonization of buildings, decarbonization of heating and cooling, for which the greening of buildings, facades and roofs plays a major role, as we said in the initial round, in terms of heating, cooling effects and quality. Then of course we have the aesthetic component, as Mrs. Paulus mentioned, which is primarily promoted by the European Bauhaus, which brings together the functional and the aesthetics elements. In the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, as said, aside from the and alongside the minimum energy performance standards, we also look at information tools, because it is very important that decisions are taken on the basis of the best evidence for the inhabitants, but also for the owners, for the financial institutions, that they know about the basic facts of a building. Where do we lose energy? How is the what is the best potential to integrate renewable energy, and what are the best options also then to decarbonize the building more broadly in terms of substance, construction materials, but also the embedded carbon, but then the carbon to operate a building for heating and cooling. That is crucial. Therefore, we will also try to expand the metrics from a pure energy savings logic, which remains very important. It's very important to save energy, because the more energy you save, the less you have to produce. And there will always be the residual challenge that not everything can be produced by renewable energy. So energy savings serves the agenda of decarbonization, but there should also be, and we are not yet there, we have to develop that. We will not have the final solution in this year's revisions on greenhouse gas emissions from buildings, that there will be a kind of inventory, there will be a kind of data set built up over time. What are actually the carbon emissions from a building, but also the carbon sink aspects of a building? What is the potential? There will have to be evidence built up. Otherwise, decisions are often taken on the basis of incomplete information and dispersed information. Information is somehow even lost across the the phases of a building from the construction to the operation, and then possibly even taking down a building. When you look at the materials which can be reused, recycled, often information is lost and someone else comes in and starts from scratch and information is lost. But and that's why we would like to see that we can strengthen, at least with this revision this year. It will not yet be a perfect one. We are not yet there. The greenhouse gas metrics, what are the implications of buildings in terms of saving greenhouse gas emissions, which can go as far as becoming a carbon sink in terms of buildings. But that depends on many factors, as said, on the materials being used, nature-based solutions, but also the way how to operate the buildings and how they can integrate renewable energy by storing it, by responding flexibly to surplus on the market, and of course reducing demand when there's a kind of shortage. So that will be very important. And then of course we also will try to look into what is a deep renovation, what actually makes that. That may not have a direct consequence in terms of operational effects within the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, but it will to some extent serve as a guiding tool to help investors, financial institutions to prioritize funding where there's really a deep renovation. The definition of a deep renovation will have to be to some extent of course, based on energy savings, but I would say it should also inspire everyone to exploit the full potential. And the full potential of a renovation will have to be, in the end, elaborated on the spot, individually for a building, but as Mrs. Paulus said, in particular for similar types of buildings in neighborhoods, in districts, in quarters, in order to create more synergies, to have basically a broader system thinking and not just individual building, but it also increases the efficiency and reduces costs because you can professionalize better. You can put together similar challenges and get advice, have a larger package for financing and administrative hurdles, which otherwise may be quite difficult to overcome for individuals. You can professionalize that and create a bigger package. That of course provides also for the need and creates the need to bring together citizens and for the local politicians in particular to serve as facilitators and the ones who inspire citizens by but it will have to be done together with the citizens really. And that is what we try to do in the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. Information tools, as mentioned, will be the Energy Performance Certificate. It will be also a building renovation passports. We will try to digitalize as much as possible, at least encourage digitalization. There should be a kind of single source in the end. There's single source, easily accessible information for all those who need that. And that will be a major challenge because we are starting from a point where often software is not compatible, where we have different tools, different aspects, dispersed information. This will not be possible to put in place within a few years even, I would say, but we have to provide the basis, the groundwork now. There's no way to wait. It has to be started. And of course, the work has already started, but we have to accelerate now in order to make sure that by 2030, at least, we can make a significant step forward to at least double the renovation rate and also to deepen renovations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stefan. Very, very interesting. I would like to, I would like to pass now, building upon what you said. I would like to ask Jure, from your perspective, which is an interesting one because you're also from a national, at national level, but not only in the European Union, also in other cities around the world. You are implementing this project. You see also I'm talking green infrastructure, meaning like
vegetation in the built environment. Now, in several countries or cities, there are more and more provisions that actually are mandating, are requiring certain specific segments of buildings, for example, to integrate, for example, new building in specific that have specific use. I'm thinking schools, so I'm thinking commercial spaces and so on. So I was wondering, which is your, from your point of view, then from an industry perspective, how do you see a regulation or like the energy performance of building directive could help? Because, and I think this is the first question, to which I would like to add also another one. Stefan rightly mentioned some evidence. I mean, there is a need to provide some evidence to debunk some myths, and I see now scanning, for example, the chat, that there is a nice question from Benny that concerns the limitation. I mean, she's asking if, for example, limited weight bearing capacity of buildings can be a problem. And I think this came up also in other discussions, also in relation to seismic issues. So can you briefly, because unfortunately, you know, the time is very limited, can you please address these two aspects? So we also provide an answer to Benny. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to the weight constraints, I mean, there are certain weight constraints when we talk about renovation, but there are already systems available which are really limited in weight and still performing or doing the job of bringing biodiversity into the system. So it's all about, you know, checking what the building can do, how we can, you know, if you talk about renovation, for example, how we can put a green roof on that. And there are ways that you could do it. And in some cases, of course, you can. But I think it's more important that in the initial phase, and if I look now into a best example, which is actually Singapore, they want to have, you know, the entire stormwater needs to stay on the premises of the building. So, and they have a provision saying you need also to have water permeable surfaces on the entire plot. It means on the ground and on the rooftop. So by designing up front, I think the EPBD or some other legislation will need to make sort of a mandatory rules for installation of green roofs and walls for all new buildings up front. So in the sense that, you know, the designers of the buildings will already integrate all these potential constraints into the entire design. So this is what I see for the new builds. What it also goes further in terms of the seismic. I mean, we do, or our members do, a lot of green roofs in Japan, for example, and they know how to do it. It needs to be lightweight. Maybe you cannot cover entire roof or entire building with the green and the walls, but you can do a parts of it, which is still better than doing nothing. So of course there are some constraints, but you can still have part of the roofs which are green, the rest of the part of the roofs are not green. When it comes to public buildings, I think we need to push it really forward that we have, you know, hospitals and schools being greened, and also the certain areas around. As Mrs. Paulus mentioned, you know, the psychological and the health aspects and well-being aspects are the positive effects. So if you look at the schools, we just recently, partly supported by local funds for projects, we have actually integrated a nice green roof on one of the schools, and we changed the roof, which was totally unused. We changed it into the living environment where actually kids can go and grow their vegetables. At the same time, it's also an open classroom. So guess what? You know, where do they want to study now? They don't want to be inside. They want to be outside in the outside classroom. So it's building the amenity space. So I think we need to have the legislation which will, you know, push up front the integration of the green infrastructure, especially, you know, in the public buildings to make an example, to the new buildings, and then also the big commercial spaces like big shopping malls. I mean, why don't we use these spaces for, you know, for more green, for more, you know, social space to mingle. So this is the perspective of challenges that we have. I mean, all the challenges can be somehow solved, and we have the tools and we have the knowledge and we have the examples from around the world how to do it. So this is, I think, you know, answering the question of this, you limits.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jure. I'd like now to go back to Aurelie, because I think this discussion that we are having on, for example, on integration, on systematic integration of a green infrastructure on certain buildings, I think it makes me think of a very nice project, Aurelie, that you are implementing. I think was Sun for School initiative or something like that, which is indeed the integration of solar panel on schools. So because you're talking about these specific public buildings, and how do you it is interesting if you want to share some of the some ideas or some elements about that initiative, and because I think that could be an interesting if you want an interesting examples where what you mentioned at the beginning, biosolar installation could become like could be proposed and promoted also for to get the educational benefits, on top of course of the reduction of emissions, health. I mean, here stormwater management. I think we have a very, very long list, but there is also this educational element which Jure brought forward. For kids, for example, living and studying in certain green environment. Aurelie.
Yes, thank you, Luigi. I mean, I'm not sure how much I can tell you about the Sun for Schools. I think that they would be best fit to tell the story themselves. But obviously, as Jure said, I mean, that's indeed a Belgian initiative with whom we've partnered some time ago, but they're completely independent, and they encourage indeed installing solar installations in schools. Which has indeed this very educational element where the children are used very early on to see those installations on the buildings, and therefore, as grown up, they are much more likely to invest in such installations for themselves. It is also true that in some of the projects that we've worked on or that they have worked on and we have been communicating about, they also combine it with those biosolar installations. I mean, in fact, it's really, those projects are really appealing in general. And Jure mentioned an element. There is another element in the south of France where you also have a contract between a solar developer and a school. So there is an agri-solar installation which is feeding the local canteen. It's not on a roof though, so that would not be a green roof per se, but the concept is there. And yes, definitely as a citizen, I would love at some point, if I was to live in a big building, I would love to have a little potager on top of my roof, which could create green electricity. So I think the benefits of it are quite self-explanatory. But on the other hand, I would like to come back, if you allow me, a bit to the enabling framework, because I think here it's really, decarbonizing buildings is a huge challenge, but which requires to look at a lot of small details. And we mentioned the EPBD, Mr. Moser mentioned it at least. I mean, I don't want to repeat that because, of course, we would have liked to see those mandatory minimum energy performance standards. We want to see binding requirements in building codes to also, whenever it's possible, have those business models happening, whether it's installing solar storage or bio roof installations when it is relevant. And probably there were good reasons, but the past really shows also that without a bit of binding elements, you cannot achieve the investments that are needed. And that's also something which we see very clearly in the renewable sector. But I think we also need to enrich the notion of energy performance if we want to reap those benefits. What does it mean, performance? Is it only decarbonization? Absolutely not. And here we have to go back to all the elements which were mentioned: air quality, water management, better livability of the environments, and all of this should be acknowledged somehow as a performant building. But even if we've done that, and we know that the past energy efficiency or even energy performance of building directive frameworks were decently ambitious still, yet the energy efficiency is really or building decarbonization is already the poor parent of the transition. Those investments are not happening. Why is that? will it happen if we increase ambitions? No. We can put binding requirements, but it seems there are other bottlenecks on the ground. And these are the exact same bottlenecks that we see when we look at rooftop solar installations. EPBD, ED, we mentioned it, but for example, the grid infrastructure, if you want solar bioroofs, you will need to connect those solar installations. We have been fighting relentlessly over the past year in the frame of the 10E review to have an acknowledgement of distributed grids at city level, at neighboring level. And what is happening actually is a joke, honestly, where we are introducing a new category for natural gas grids, and we don't even introduce a category for distribution networks. If we don't do that, we will not have green cities. That's not going to happen at other grid levels. So the 10E, it's a desperate call from my side because it's almost approved, and it will be essential for the renovation wave. If you want solar roof, you will need distribution grids, and many countries already have their grids absolutely congested. And big countries, Italy, Netherlands, today people cannot connect. And in fact, there was a very recent case in Netherlands where farmers could not connect their solar installations, even though they were showing beneficial elements when it comes to biodiversity. So the 10E, we need to do something, absolutely. The Bauhaus, as Jutta said earlier, needs to show its strengths. It's a very nice concept, but we need to really harvest this innovation potential, putting together the right people, the architects, etc. Because that's also one thing we've realized. If you want to unlock the potential of such installations, architects, they like pretty stuff, but they don't like risk. Because when you build a building, you're liable for it over the entire building lifetime. So you prefer things that are proven, safe, you know how you can replace it. You know, if you have an issue, you're gonna be able to access the maintenance. So those kind of things, which are kind of innovative, are scaring them. And it also means we need to build the whole kind of supply chain, or the whole people which are skilled also to develop those installations and to maintain them on the long run. And skills and jobs is also another co-parent of the energy transition. We keep saying that you know, we're going to create thousands and thousands of jobs. It's kind of true in the potential, but if you don't train these people, these renovations will not happen. And actually the lack of skilled workforce is already one of the key bottlenecks we have for building decarbonization. So we need also more action at EU level to have those skilled workforce arriving in all European cities and putting in place those investments. And maybe the last thing indeed, in terms of bringing the ambition to the ground, it was mentioned already, the cities, the local players, absolutely. They are already taking more ownership. I think the EU is already kind of reflecting how they can empower them even more. But it's clear that, for example, as a forest citizen, or in Brussels, Forest Commune, I know that my commune is providing help to actually green not your roof, but your facade. And there is communication about it, there is information about it. And even though I know nothing about how to do it, I know I can easily access information and require that from my commune. And so if we had similar systems for green roofs, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would go for it. So it's a mosaic of legislative action that we need to be looking at.
Thank you very much, Aurelie. Jutta, how from European Parliament perspective, how the EPBD should approach this issue of green infrastructure?
Yes, I think there are several issues which could be approached within the EPBD. Although it's named Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, I think we should also look at the gray energy. So at the energy which is enshrined in the materials which we use. Of course, there we have also the Construction Products Directive, which is being revised. So we have some synergies there. But if we look at the effects of, for example, greening of facades, then you have an insulation effect through this green infrastructure that actually reduces, for example, insulation with other materials with a lot of embodied energy, possibly a lot of embodied energy. So I think this could be an angle how to include or how to address green infrastructure in the EPBD. And also, I think what we should always look at, I mean, we're right now trying to figure out how the Green Deal as a whole could be monitored. We have been discussing the 8th Environmental Action Program in Parliament, and there we have called on the Commission that we need a real good set of indicators in order to be able to measure progress. So in that regard, I would love to see indicators for the Green Deal which look at the energy perspective, but also at circular economy, at biodiversity, and to have this set of indicators apply on all new legislation, whether it's originally on, let's say, biodiversity or energy or not, because all these issues are interlinked. So I think it would be a good idea when revising our legislation to always see the whole picture and not focus on one element only, because I think focusing on one element only has gotten us into that situation where we are now, because we have just ignored several things that were happening outside of the original legislation, which only looked at one thing. One answer to Aurelie. I think the problem that you have been addressing on the grid and on the distribution grid, I tend to believe that 10E is just not the right regulation there, because 10E is looking at cross-border projects, or at least projects which are used by more than one member state. So the distribution grid of a community or a city, it cannot be addressed via 10E. There we have rather the instrument over the Electricity Market Directive, where member states have to make sure that there is, for example, access to the grid, to the electricity market for active consumers producing their own renewable energy. And that's something where I'm getting on Kadri Simpson's nerves since over a year, always saying, well, Kadri, don't you think member states need more support because they're not doing a good job in transposing the active consumers' rights from the previous mandate international law? And now we have the last deadline running out on 30th June, and I will write the next letter to Kadri on the 1st of July, asking her when she will step on member states' toes in order to make them improve their electricity market design, but also enforce the distribution grids, because else we will not be able to actually use the renewable energy that we can produce in our cities and communities. Thanks.
Can I get a quick reply on the TENI, Jutta? Because I think that's really,
yes, really, very briefly, so we close then with the final round. Go ahead,
yes,
please.
Of course. No, just to say that what you say, Jutta, is right, but it's also because I think the focus of the TENI is not right there. Because it is not said that it has to focus on cross-border projects. It is said that it has to focus on what we call projects of common interest. And so the problem is how we define projects of common interest, where we tend to have indeed a focus which is very much cross-border, whereas in some areas which are connected at local level, in France, Région PACA is very congested, for example, and solving those bottlenecks has a European common interest because it also fluidifies the grid infrastructure. And in fact, member states cannot enforce distribution grids because it's distribution system operators that have to invest. And when we ask distribution system operators, why don't you invest? They tell us it is not a business case. We are a regulated asset. It doesn't bring money to connect an active consumer. It doesn't bring money to connect an EV. It is a cost. And we will not ask a DSO to do charity. They're not here for that. They're also here to have a bit of money, like everyone who has to live. So those DSOs, they need financial support in order to be able to upgrade their grids. And the TENI could do something about that.
Thank you, Aurelie. I would like to move on with the focus on green infrastructure. And here I see among the Q&A, I see an interesting question concerns the
the embodied energy of green roof solutions. So I would like to address this to Jure with the goal of trying to address issues, and the bank needs and issues. So does the CO2 absorption by green roof compensate for the added CO2 emissions from the embodied energy of the additional concrete and steel required to support the green infrastructure? Jure, can you please address this question?
Luigi, I hope I am mistaken, but I have the feeling that Jure is facing some technical difficulties. So okay. If we could direct a question to someone else for the moment, I will let you know when he's connected.
Yeah, well, I will go back to him with this question then when he's back. There are other questions that concern the financing of green infrastructure, and for this there will be a dedicated session, the next panel 3, which is starting at 12 specifically on financing green infrastructure. So I think for this last 5 minutes I would go to a final round, so conclusion, final remarks. Stefan, starting from you, there's been a lot of inputs, a lot of observations from in only an hour, a little bit more than an hour of discussion. I mean, and it shows the nature of the discussion, but also the interest around this event. Many people attending, a lot of very high-level speakers taking place to this. Everyone is really interested in this agenda. Citizens want to change. Green infrastructure are a little bit everywhere. I mean, biodiversity strategy 2030, adaptation strategy, renovation wave, Bauhaus. Next we would like to see next on the list the European, the EPBD or any other, let's say, tool, policy and regulatory tool coming from DGN, because I think there is interest around that. So around this, I would like to ask them, the speaker, to provide a final round of comments and conclusions, and so we can nicely wrap up and move on with the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luigi. Indeed, it has been a very rich discussion, and our job in the Commission is now to try to pull together as much as we can in the impact assessments, which are of course being conducted and have partly been already finalized for the July package, or nearly finalized, but for the others which are remaining, all the arguments. I think what Mrs. Paulus also said, it is crucial to think about implementation, about indicators, what are the most important pieces of information which we can generate to really guide then also the implementation. It's crucial to have basically a regulatory framework in place, but also financial incentives and technical assistance which really play together, which do not contradict each other, which enables then also in particular local actors to do what it takes. They will in the end be the addressees for the most of it to use the available instruments. Of course, member states have to ensure that minimum energy performance standards are implemented on the territory, but in the end, it's the users and the ones responsible are the local actors, politicians, but also the owners, the financial institutions. They have to be able to operate. And what Aurelie, for instance, said, that it's crucial to think also about business cases, to identify areas where, and Mrs. Paulus also said that, to identify areas where things are not happening on their own because there's not necessarily a profit-making case. And that's what I wanted to add also. There are a number of areas where there's really a public good character. So where we cannot expect that from a pure economic point of view, things will be happening. So we can try to enforce that through standards, but in particular also through financial help schemes which are set up, which create the right incentives and then bridge the gap between what private financing can contribute and what actually would be a public good generated through additional actions going in the right direction. and that will have to be designed crucially by the member states. So the European Union, of course, more broadly can steer, can exchange good practices, can provide the financing through the European tools. But in the end, what is required is a kind of skillful and tailor-made design of financial support schemes. That is very important, and will then make it or actually not achieve what needs to be done. Because in the end, we are working with private actors, and they have to, in the end, face the bill and have a positive outcome of whatever actions they take. And it's crucial to understand these incentives, but also the limitations in order to design the overall framework, regulatory, financial, technical assistance.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Stefan. Jutta, a few seconds, final remarks. We have only a couple of minutes left.
Yes, I know, and I also have an upcoming meeting, so I'll be very brief. I think it's good that we have a common understanding that green infrastructure is important and helpful in many ways, not only on insulation, but also on biodiversity, on people's health, on an environment which is favorable and which makes our cities and communities better places to live in. So this common understanding is of course important. I think what we also should keep in mind that we have in the EU budget and also in the RRF, in the Recovery and Resilience Fund, biodiversity targets and climate targets. And so we should make it very clear to member states that by putting money into green infrastructure, they can actually achieve both of these targets, and they should not refrain from doing so, because usually citizens are quite happy with seeing these things. I mean, if you go to a city where there's already a building with a green facade or anything, you will find tourists standing there making pictures. So you have a triple advantage in that. And what I would like to give as food for thought to the Commission, because it just sprung to my mind, would it be applicable or useful if this kind of, let's call it subsidy, would be laid down in a dedicated chapter for the state aid guidelines for energy and environment? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jutta. Aurelie, a few final remarks. I mean, I've noted interest in developing and continuing the discussion between the solar and green infrastructure for biosolar plans and vision. So we will follow up on this with you. But if you want to provide us with your final remarks and conclusions on this event.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks a lot. I think a lot has been said already. Maybe what I would further emphasize is really, as I see really the role of local policymakers. Jutta said earlier, it should be the role of policymakers to make life better for their citizens. I see a much more direct connection with citizens when it comes to mayors, for example, and parliament elected, which tend to be more directly in contact also with the environment, the urban environment. And I would hope that in the near term, cities actually do that by themselves, as Jutta said, because we see very direct, concrete advantage. However, and as Stefan said, we do need to channel the right financing instruments and to make it a business case where it is possible. And just to emphasize, it's very good that Jutta mentioned the RRF and other financing instruments. The recovery has the main objective also to recreate jobs. And clearly, I think green roofs have an immense potential for job creation, even more if combined with solar installations. On our end, distributed PV is the most job-intensive energy source, according to all sources you would find. It creates 3 times more jobs than large-scale installations. And if you combine it with the built environment, which is also a job mine, basically, I think there is a very strong potential for creating new jobs. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Aurelie. And then to conclude, Jure, a few final remarks from you. I mean, before I've addressed you a question on embodied carbon. There was someone from the participants. If perhaps, unfortunately, we are running late and there is another panel coming up, if you can perhaps address that. I've seen it, Manfred, our president, has posted an article and on the chat. Maybe Jure, you can also add something in written after the.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
For the conclusion, I think what we need to do, and we were looking at that already for some time. So there are three things. So first of all, all the policy makers need to understand better the performance infrastructure. That's for sure. Then secondly, we need to teach people to be able to install it it's local business, so it's local work, so we can build, bring work, we can bring jobs to the cities, so it's extra business for everyone. And third one, there is a lot of skepticism about the performance of the green infrastructure. I think, it would be really wise to have sort of a green performance passport for all the green infrastructure, which will define, what is the storm water capacity, in order to cool the areas, in order to protect the water to go into the sewage system and stuff like that. So I think these are the three things that we should consider in the next, development of the green infrastructure. And definitely, working with Solar Europe more closely, that would make, I think, a lot of progress.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jure. Thank you very much, Aurelie. Thank you very much, Stefan, for taking the time and participate to this really interesting panel. I would like to just announce the next one, which will start in about 9 minutes, and is about financing green infrastructure. We will have speakers from the European Investment Bank, colleagues from DG Regio to talk about cohesion policy. We will discuss a bit also of taxonomy for biodiversity, and we will also have representatives from cities. So we look forward to that panel, and yes, have a great day. Thank you.